I've never felt this good for this long. Shouldn't I be falling apart right now, bonking, or otherwise discombobulating?
3, 2, 1.
Leadville, the podcast for the 100-mile mountain bike race. Hottie here, along with Fatty, bringing you the show that answers your questions, gives you training tips, details the course, and tells the stories about the highest and hardest one-day mountain bike race in America, the Leadville Trail 100 Mountain Bike Race. This episode is brought to you by Banjo Brothers. Tough, practical, and affordable, Banjo Brothers is Minneapolis-based and has the right bag for you. Bags for bike packing, commuting, or racing the Leadville 100. Fatty has had a Banjo Brothers bag on his Leadville bike and all of his other bikes for more than a decade. Whatever you need to carry on your bike, Banjo Brothers has a bag for it. Check them out at banjobrothers.com, and thanks to Banjo Brothers for supporting this show. If you subscribe to our show in Apple Podcasts, and we hope you will, you'll notice that along with our weekly Season 1 show, we are releasing a half dozen Season 0 shows, binge style, all at once here. Unlike our regular shows, these Season 0 shows are one-topic Leadville race stories. They're Fatty recounting some of his favorite races out of the 21 times he has started the Leadville Trail 100. Listen to one when you need some inspiration, or just listen to all of them at once when you're on a long ride. This story is from the first time Fatty raced a single speed at Leadville. I know, sounds crazy. 4 years later, he'd win the category, but this time he was just seeing whether it was possible for him to finish with just one gear. And as it turns out, this was one of his favorite races. Fatty, go ahead, explain why.
Ask yourself this question. What would it take for you to call a race your best ever? Would you need to win? Set a personal record? Move up in your category standings? Those are the things I've always wanted from a race. But last Saturday at the Leadville 100, none of those things happened. I'm overweight, I'm unfocused, I was considerably slower than last year. I dropped in the standings from 135th place last year to 268th this year, almost exactly twice as far down the leaderboard. But I've never had a better race. The thing about having done a race 11 times in the past 11 years is that the sense of déjà vu is practically overwhelming as you start the 12th time. The hum of thousands of knobby tires on pavement, the surging and slowing, the relief of being off the pavement and on dirt, the jockeying for a better spot as you repass all the people who evidently are paved downhill mountain bike specialists, but are confounded by a double track. The ominous "it's finally begun" sensation, when you know you're at the very beginning of the adventure, but have no idea how it's going to turn out. This déjà vu feeling ended as soon as I began the first climb. Doug had already caught me, so we were climbing together, taking turns following each other's lines. It was great. We were talking, passing folks, and enjoying the fact that our plan to ride this race together had come together so quickly. The first climb is so crowded, though. There are 1,000 cyclists, all feeling fresh and strong, all trying to pass each other on a narrow, steep jeep road that riding the single speed becomes really difficult. See, riding a single speed requires you to keep your momentum, and it's actually much harder to climb slowly than to climb at your own pace. Turning the crank slowly becomes painful, and you have to work hard to keep your balance. On a geared bike, I would have compensated by dropping to a low gear and spinning. On a single speed, I just tried to stay on my bike and pedal. Then I had an epiphany, an obvious, pure genius epiphany. If it was harder to ride than walk, I should walk. That would become my guiding philosophy for the whole day. I got off my bike and pushed it up the hill, losing ground to Doug, who was still riding, and thinking that there was a great chance Doug might clean my clock that day. To my surprise, I found I was okay with that idea. After the first few miles of the St. Kevin's climb, there was a hairpin turn that signals good news. The steep, crowded part of the climb is over, and crowding will not be a problem again for the rest of the day. With Doug out of sight ahead of me, I should have felt pressure to catch up, but I didn't. I, for the first time ever in a race, didn't feel any pressure. My only responsibility for this race was to have fun. That was Doug's mandate, too. If he was having fun going faster than me, that's cool. Which made me wonder, where did this attitude come from? Seriously, it's like I suddenly turned into a Buddhist monk or something. Maybe it's the extra weight. Before too long, though, I saw Doug. He hadn't gotten too far ahead of me after all. So we started riding together again, trading lines and trash talk. I'm pretty sure Doug had more wind and adrenaline than I did, because he was handily winning the trash talk banter battle. Of course, I was making it easy for him. In particular, I remember bringing too much speed into a corner and having to brake hard before I could turn, almost bringing my bike to a stop. I'm pretty sure I looked like I was just learning to ride a bike. "What kind of turn was that?" asked Doug, as he easily and expertly carved the corner I had just bungled. A really badly executed one?" I asked, no clever comeback prepared. Doug just shook his head, disappointed in my lack of wit, and put some distance between us. Every year there's a certain spot on the St. Kevin's climb I always look for. You're riding along on a relatively flat part of the climb when, wham, there's a right turn followed by a previously unseen steep climb. I always remember it because several years ago when I came upon it, like most riders, hastily dumped my gears, trying to get from middle to granny, even as I started the unanticipated climb, and gave myself a colossal case of chain suck. It probably took 10 minutes to work the chain loose, but it felt like an hour. At least I don't have to worry about that this year, I thought, as I rounded the corner. No gears to change. I'd either climb it or walk it. And then I saw, right in the spot where I got chain suck years ago, my friend Nick, resplendent in his peak fat cyclist jersey, just getting back on his bike. He explained he had been struggling with chain suck for the past 15 minutes, which made me think three things. If Nick and I have both had chain suck in that spot, I bet hundreds of other racers have too. 2. Nick had already put 15 minutes on me? 3. Single speeds are awesome. I had no trouble cleaning that climb. "Get out of my way, you crazy Australian," I yelled. Pure comedic genius. Because Nick's an Australian. And crazy is an adjective that occurred to me at the moment. Doug, Nick, and I rode together for a while, taking turns leading on the rolling climb. But I noticed each time there was a climb, I pulled a little further ahead of them. I wasn't trying to, honest. On a single speed, though, you pretty much just climb at the rate you can. It's as difficult to ride below your pace as it is to ride above it. By the time I got to the top of St. Kevin's and began the 4-mile paved downhill, I had left them behind. They'll catch me soon enough, I thought. I don't believe I have ever mentioned this before, but I am kind of a goofball. I know, that's very startling news. I wanted to bring this up, though, because it helps explain my next two interactions with riders. After coasting down the St. Kevin's paved descent, I wound up behind a couple of cyclists, a man piloting, a woman stoking, on a tandem. "Hey, tandem," I called out in a sing-song voice. I don't know why I chose the sing-song voice. Oxygen deprivation, maybe? "Hey, bicycle," the man called back, using a similar sing-song voice. An excellent reply, I must say. I passed them, during which my favorite conversation of the race occurred. Right at the moment I drew alongside, the man farted, loudly, a Monty Python-esque fart. Rap. "Ew," I said, once again failing to do my part in contributing wit to the conversation. "How do you think I feel?" the woman asked. I'm sorry, but that still cracks me up. I love good situational fart comedy. I turned onto the next climb, a wide dirt road and just barely uphill. And that is when I had my second epiphany. I should eat whenever I'm riding on parts of the course where it's easy to eat, I thought. I'm not saying my epiphanies are brilliant, but they are useful. I ripped open a bag of caffeinated watermelon jelly bean sport beans and ate them. Delicious. Plus, they make you spit in bright green. Before too long, I caught up with a rider on a yellow Fisher Paragon, which some of you may remember was the bike I had used as my Leadville weapon of choice last year. I got all nostalgic, so I made up a song on the spot, which I sang aloud right behind this guy. It went like this, sung to the tune of Particle Man. Paragon Man, riding his bike like a paragon can. Unfortunately or not, I couldn't think of another line, so I passed him. However, we would pass each other several times during the next hour or so, and each time I would sing the 2 lines of Paragon Man. I have to assume he was enormously grateful when we eventually lost sight of each other. The power line descent is really the only technical descent in the entire Leadville race. If there is a spot on this course where it pays to be cautious, this is it. So I cruised down at a mellow pace, figuring that it's better to take it easy than to pinch flat. Judging from the 18 people I saw on the side of the trail fixing flats, yes, I counted, not everyone made the same choice. I tried not to feel smug as I passed all these folks. Really, I did. And yet, I couldn't help myself. When I got to the bottom of the power line descent, I was immediately passed by Nick, then Bill, then Lindy. All of them were turning big gears on the short, flat, paved section that connects the power line trail to the dirt road leading to the Twin Lakes Dam. I had no chance whatsoever of hanging with them, not on the single speed, so I didn't worry about it. We'd see each other again, or not. So riding along on the road, no chance of catching a pace line, I caught up with Cole Klober, another single-speed rider, whom I had spent a large chunk of the race last year riding with. This year, he hadn't trained at all, and was just there for the fun of it. That sounded good to me. So instead of taking turns pulling each other, we just rode side by side, talking about how he's just got engaged, has been traveling a lot, and has gotten a lot of rock climbing this year, while meanwhile dozens of cyclists and pace lines passed us. And I kept looking back, wondering when Doug was going to catch me. He and I were supposed to be riding together. Cole and I cruised up into the first aid station, Pipeline, at which point he must have pulled off to get some food and water because I emerged from the station alone. I resolved to take it nice and easy on the rolling 15-mile stretch leading to Twin Lakes Dam. That way Doug would catch me and we would ride the big climb, Columbine Mine, together. So I cruised, not pedaling soft, but not killing myself. And then I saw the most peculiar crash aftermath I have ever seen. The dirt road was wide and straight. It was well graded. It was perhaps the least crash-conducive trail I have ever been on. But there was a guy lying on the ground, his face completely ground off. People had stopped, taking care of him, so I kept going. But I still think back to that crash, wondering how it possibly could have happened. Maybe he crashed while reaching back into a pocket to grab some food. Or maybe he crashed while taking off his vest or jacket. Maybe he tangled up with another rider. One thing I know for sure, if I ever had a crash on an open, wide, straight road, I'd at least make up a good story for why. The 15 miles went fast, at least in my mind they went fast, and I was at the Twin Lakes Dam aid station. Doug's wife was there, mostly to crew for him, but also crewing for me. She expertly swapped out my bottles and food, which I will list here for your edification. 1 bottle of water, 1 bottle of Coke, 2 packets of Cliff Shot blocks, 2 packets of Power Gel, 2 packets of sports beans. That's about 800 calories, all easily consumable while riding a bike. As she swapped my food out, I looked up the trail expecting Doug, while I drank a can of chicken and Stars soup. And now we're at my favorite part of the race, and my favorite part of the story. The problem is, it's not a part of the story that reads especially well. See, the whole thing can be summed up as follows. Columbine is an 8-mile climb, and I felt great the whole climb, and I passed a lot of people. But that doesn't really capture it. I had been dreading doing this climb on my single speed, figuring it would finish me, but it didn't. Instead, I got into a climbing groove, standing most of the time, rocking the bike side to side with each pedal stroke. I stopped being chatty. I just felt good, strong, and calm. I passed scores of people, Nick, Bill, Lindy, Bry, Mark, and Serena. I didn't talk long with anyone. My interest now was in climbing. Very few people passed me during this section. All the while, I kept looking up ahead, wondering when we'd see the race leaders come blazing by in the other direction. I couldn't help but be excited. And then, 3 hours, 38 minutes into the race, I'm not sure of that time, they zoomed by. Lance Armstrong leading, Weens immediately behind. I only saw them for a second, but was astounded at how fast they were going. I also took note of Armstrong's expression. That guy is focused when he's on a bike. He doesn't look angry or fierce, just determined. I believe that when the complete history of cycling is written, it will be generally acknowledged that Lance Armstrong had the best game face of all time. That, anyway, is my contention based on approximately 3/4 of a second of observation. Once I'd climbed the first 5 miles of Columbine, I got to the hard part, where the trail gets steep, rocky, and loose. When riding gears, I've always tried to ride as much as possible of this section, as a point of pride. Only when forced would I get off. This year was different. Whenever I got to a section that would be harder to ride than walk, I just got off. Easy. And as a result, I think I arrived at the top of Columbine only marginally slower than my fastest years, and I felt much, much stronger. And that's with me being 20 pounds heavier than usual. I think there may be some merit to this whole work smarter, not harder thing. I got to the Columbine aid station in 5 hours and 10 minutes. Since most people, including myself, generally finish the race in almost exactly double their turnaround time, this put me way ahead of the 11 hours, 11 minutes, 11 seconds time that I was originally shooting for. So maybe I should adjust my time goal, I thought. How about 10 hours, 10 minutes, 10 seconds? That would be cool. As soon as I rolled in, I got treated to the famous Leadville aid station hospitality. Seriously, Nordstrom has nothing on these guys. One guy took my bike and asked what I wanted in my bottles. Just top off one of them with Coke, I said. Another asked me what I wanted to eat. Got any cantaloupe, I asked. Yes, they did. And how? Big platters of cantaloupe, cut into perfect bite-sized pieces. I stood in front of one of the platters and ate my fill. I would guess conservatively that I had spent between 7 and 10 minutes eating cantaloupe, with the occasional half banana thrown in. And now, just for a moment, I'd like to flash forward. If you read my blog, you already know that I finished the race in 10 hours and 6 minutes. And a little later in this story, you'll find that toward the final quarter of the race, I started taking the idea of finishing in under 10 hours very seriously. Of course, if I hadn't spent all that time eating cantaloupe, I would have finished in 9:58. Or would I? Did spending time standing, resting, and eating buy more time than it cost? It's a question every endurance racer has to consider every time we stop. And having made the choice one way or the other, we never know how things would have turned out the other way. And I hereby dub this quandary the cantaloupe paradox. I have never enjoyed the first part of the Columbine descent. Mostly this is because you're riding down a rocky, loose trail, while other people are hiking their bikes up that self-same trail. Crashing would be all of the following: painful, public, and embarrassing. This year, I felt good. I didn't get passed as often on the downhill, and I didn't feel on the verge of panic during the descent. Apart from its technical nature, the Columbine descent is like a very short rolling party, where you only have half a second to mingle with each guest. I yelled the following at various riders as I descended. "Catch me, Doug, you're 2 minutes behind. Go, Warners. Bry. Nice work, Bill. Keep it up, Nick. Lisa. Yeah, go, Bobby." I would like to point out that I yelled the appropriate things at the appropriate people. For example, I did not yell "Lisa" at anyone but Lisa, who is kicking serious butt, by the way. Anyway, I got to the bottom of Columbine, then rolled through the Twin Lakes Dam aid station, doing a trilling yell to the people on the sidelines, worked up. This technique works great. The people on the side love to get excited for a rider who's excited too. This, in turn, gives you a giant morale boost and a shot of adrenaline. Highly recommended. Kim swapped out my food in record time while I drank another soup and looked up the road for Doug, who would surely be catching me as I sat there. But he didn't. So I got back on the bike and headed out, feeling as cheerful and happy to be riding as I was at the beginning of the day. And I'm not exaggerating about that. I pedaled along the rolling dirt road between Twin Lakes and the final major aid station, Pipeline. After that, you're at the hardest part of the race. Again, not pushing myself, just riding at my good single-speed intensity, expecting Doug to catch me shortly. I took a look down at my Garmin. It showed that I was making really good time. Several minutes later, I looked down again. Wow, I was making really good time. Hey, wait a second. That's the same time. And apparently I hadn't gone anywhere in the last little while. Oh, that's because I evidently and accidentally pressed the stop button. So I started the timer again and found out from another rider how long we had really been out, then did the math. My bike computer had been stopped for about half an hour. For the rest of the race, I would just add half an hour to the time my stopwatch showed. And that effectively ended my quest for a specific finishing time, like 10 hours, 10 minutes, 10 seconds. But it did open the door for me to try for something less precise but equally cool, a sub-10-hour finish on my single speed. I started riding harder and stopped waiting for Doug to catch me. I rolled into the final aid station, reloaded with food, and headed back out. Within a few minutes, Brian, Mark, and Serena caught me. They invited me to draft, but I knew that it wouldn't happen. Not on a single speed. Go on, I said bravely. I'm no good to you. So they went on. For the first time that day, I was bothered by being passed. For once, I wanted to finish in front of the Warner dynasty. Oh well, nothing I could do about it now. Except once we turned onto the dirt and started climbing, I passed them back. And I wasn't killing myself to do it. Then we got to the hike-a-bike section. This is just a nasty, evil climb, and my mind boggles that Weens and Armstrong rode it. As I pushed my bike, I caught up with a woman rider, also pushing. This is the hardest part of the race, I said, conversationally. No shit, Sherlock, she said. Yeah, I guess that was kind of obvious, I concluded. And that was the end of the conversation. Once the hike-a-bike ended, I started passing people again, while I was riding my single speed, and they were walking their geared bikes. Yes, I could suppose you say I felt pretty good. And, frankly, it made me suspicious. I've never felt this good for this long. Shouldn't I be falling apart right now, bonking, or otherwise discombobulating? But it never happened. I never felt bad the whole day. I expect I'll be trying to replicate this effect in every race for the rest of my life, and I doubt it will ever happen again. I should just be glad it happened even once, really. As I reached the top of the power line climb, it started to rain. And then it started to rain hard. Having foregone getting a jacket at the last aid station, I just pulled my arm warmers up and did my best to do the descent. The problem was I couldn't see. The muddy water from my tires quickly coated my glasses, and I was left to interpret the blurry colors into the best line to ride as best as I could. I've never been so happy to reach the bottom of a descent. Now it was time to do the St. Kevin's climb. 4 miles of pavement in cold, heavy rain and a little bit of hail, just for fun. I stood up and started pedaling, just rocking the bike left and right, head down. I didn't have to choose a good gear for climbing. That choice had been made long ago. As I pedaled, I remembered something Bob, Kenny, and I had talked about during the drive to Leadville. It would be a good idea to have a sad climbing song playlist for your iPod, a bunch of songs to listen to when you're on a hard climb and are in the mood for some self-pity. I didn't have an iPod with me, but I could sing, and I did the whole way. All by myself. All by myself. You know, it's too bad I don't know any more lyrics to that song. They would have come in handy. By the time I got to the top of the St. Kevin's section, the rain had mostly stopped. I was starting to see that it was possible, although very, very close for me to finish in under 10 hours. So I pushed it. I took the St. Kevin's descent fast, although I still got passed by more people than I passed. And then, for the first time that day, did Crazy Legs cadence, trying to ride fast on the last little flat section before the climb up the boulevard, a dirt road climb that dumps you out a few blocks from the finish line. And here I gave it everything I had. I pushed it as hard as I could, passing 8 people on that final climb, then another 3 once I got to the pavement. For some reason, finishing under 10 hours was now important to me. Even as I crossed the finish line, I didn't know if I had done it. I looked back at the official clock. 10 hours, 6 minutes. Nope, I hadn't done it. Still, I had finished about an hour faster than I had originally hoped to, and that's not bad. Oh, who am I kidding? I feel like I totally kicked butt.
That's it for this episode. Next time in Season 0, Episode 4, a first for Fatty. His 15th try at Leadville, and finally a sub-9-hour finish. If you haven't yet subscribed, please head on over to Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts and do so. And be sure to leave us that 5-star rating and a review. In the early days of a podcast, you doing so makes an enormous difference in whether other Leadville 100 racers and hopefuls can find us. For Fatty, I'm Hadi. Be sure to check back on Tuesdays for our regular show. Train well, race hard, and we'll see you at the finish line this August.